Hello and welcome to part 1 of the Complete Beginner's Guide on Pokemon card collecting. Now just a heads up, this is going to be directed towards Pokemon card collecting because I simply don't know enough about the actual game to be able to do any kind of tutorial on it. My goal here is to give you a holistic view around everything around this hobby, not just telling you what to do or what the rarest card is, because everyone has a completely different way of collecting. And so if you know everything around the hobby as a whole, it will make your journey a lot less frustrating and a lot more enjoyable. This first episode here is going to be about sets and generations, and then part 2 is going to be about card types and card rarities, and then there'll be more to come after that, so make sure to stay tuned to watch all of them if you want to be, as I said, in that holistic view of the whole entire hobby. So just for a bit of context about me, probably about a year ago now, I just got this absolute sudden urge to start collecting Pokemon cards. At first, I'll be honest, I'll put my hands up, I was super embarrassed about trying to get into this hobby because I really thought it was like just for kids. And so I used to do that thing where I would pretend that I was buying it for my cousin or something stupid like that. But then as I grew and knew more and more about this hobby, I just realised how absolutely massive it actually is. But if you're anything like me, then when I first started, I had thousands of like really silly, stupid questions that I just couldn't find a straightforward answer to anywhere. So whilst all of that is still relatively fresh in my brain, I'm going to try and go through the complete basics and those weird, funny little silly questions that I used to have that I've now since found the answer to try and give you guys an easier job at starting at this hobby. So this little series is for anyone who's newly gone into the hobby and wants to dive deeper and know more, or if you want to give it to your mum who needs to have a little bit more background context when you start talking to them about your special illustration rare Charizard that you are going crazy about. Either way, I hope you find some use to it. Due to highly popular demand, aka one comment, this is going to be a little mini series of smaller videos instead of doing like one big bulky video. So as I said before, episode 1 or part 1 is going to be about sets and generations. So in Pokemon there are currently 9 generations, and in each generation a whole bunch of new Pokemon get added to what is called the Pokédex, which is basically just a huge list of every Pokemon that's ever been created. Now I think everyone and their grandma knows about the basics of Generation 1 with Pikachu and all the OG starters being Charmander, Squirtle and Bulbasaur of course. Each generation lasts for about 3 years as it aligns with the mainline games. So as we can see here, we can see Scarlet and Violet came out in November 2022, Sword and Shield was in November 2019, Sun and Moon was November 2016, and this pattern has happened for a while now as you can see. However, this might be breaking for the next generation actually, because it gets a little bit more complicated here. So basically, if they stuck to schedule, then you would expect Generation 10 to come out next year, because again, that's been 3 years. But they've already announced Pokemon Legends ZA, which is not, or ZA, whatever, which is not a mainline game, but Pokemon 30th Anniversary will be in 2026, which most people have predicted is when Generation 10 will be released, as that seems rather fitting. But of course, with each generation comes cards. And at the start of every single generation, the first set that always comes out is always called blank base set. So as we're in the Scarlet and Violet era right now, the first set that came out was Scarlet and Violet base set. But of course, after that, lots and lots more sets come out, each with brand new cards in every single set. And they usually come out around every 4 months, but sometimes it's a little bit less, sometimes it's a little bit more, so that's kind of just a bit of a rough gauge, I would say. But until the next generation, being Generation 10, comes out, every single set falls under the Scarlet and Violet name. Now looking at previous eras, we can see there's around 16 or 17 sets per era or per generation, but that's only more in the modern times, because as you go a bit more vintage and a bit older, there are a lot less in just one singular era or generation, sometimes even just having 3 or 4 in that one section, one generation. Now, one of the first things, if not the first thing, I was worried about when I started collecting was frankly where to start. I was worried that if I went with the most recent one, then I'd be missing out on older stuff, but then if I went with older ones, then I'll be out of date completely with what was happening now. So tip number 1 for new collectors, go with the most recent set to date. As of recording this, the most recent set that's come out is Twilight Masquerade of the Scarlet and Violet era. Also, coincidentally, probably my favourite set that's come out in this era. But anyway, not the point. Getting into the buzz of opening a new set alongside everyone else is an unmatched feeling, and you'll also be discovering the brand new set with the brand new cards alongside everyone else. If you try and go with older sets, well, firstly, they're going to be more expensive, but we'll get to that in a later video. And secondly, they're just going to be a lot harder to find, which will make you more frustrated and probably end up just giving up. Once you start with the most recent set, you can then keep up with all the ones that come out after that. And it also keeps you a bit more aligned with what's actually happening in Pokemon right now. Because when I first came back to Pokemon, I was so lost. I had no idea what was going on. I hadn't been invested in the franchise for so long that all these new terms being flown around, I was like, what is going on? So when you get into the most recent ones, it just helps you get a more, again, holistic view of Pokemon in general. Obviously, this is just my advice to new collectors. You don't have to listen to me, but if you think that you're going to get a $19.99 first edition base pack, good luck. That's all I'm going to say. I have multiple apps that I use for my collecting journey, but if you want one to particularly just look at all the sets in different generations, I would highly recommend PokeLector. So here we can see all the sets that have been released for the Scarlet and Violet era. But then, as you can see, we can also scroll to everything in every single generation of Pokemon. And then by clicking on them, we can see the list of sets within that one generation. A general idea to go by is that the older you go with generations and sets, the more expensive it will be. Especially if it contains a chase card, like a card that everyone's going for, because that just bumps up the price because everyone wants to be able to pull it on their own. Certain sets that are in high demand, especially in the modern era, change a lot of the time. So it's kind of hard to give a set list of the sort of ones that you're looking at. But for modern sets, no, for vintage sets, sorry, that's just, they're all going to be, always going to be expensive and always going to be wanting to chase after. But as of recording this, the 2 more modern sets that everyone's going crazy for right now, one is from the Sword and Shield generation called Evolving Skies, which everyone wants this one card. It's the Moonbryon, which is basically just an Umbreon with a moon. It's a nickname, yeah. And then from the Scarlet and Violet era, everyone's going mental over Scarlet and Violet 151, which basically every time Pokemon bring back the Generation 1 Pokemon, so the original 151 Pokemon, everyone goes absolutely mental, including myself. Now I'm just going to run through very quickly all the generations and any notable features or changes that may have happened in them. And this section may seem quite daunting because this is the first episode, so if you just hold on and wait till the next episode where I talk about card types and card rarities, everything will make a lot more sense after that. Of course, all the sets from the original base set are obviously as vintage as you get, so very popular, and of course very expensive. Gym Heroes is next for its iconic little symbol of the trainers for that particular Pokemon, which it correlates to in the anime, which obviously is then followed by Gym Challenges, which is basically the bad guys from Generation 1 with the same sort of idea as Gym Heroes. Now, tops are hit and miss. Either you're a fan of them or you're not. Personally, I'm not, because I just prefer the cards that look like proper Pokemon cards, but each to their own anyways, and they were only released for a very short amount of time, so some people like that idea. The Neo era is very popular as well, and it introduced Generation 2 to Pokemon cards. One particular set that was very important in this era was Neo Revelation, as it introduced shiny Pokemon to the TCG for the first time. Now, Legendary Collection is a big hitter. The holos, but particularly the Firework Effect reverse holos, are such good cards, and I really need one in my collection. So I'm really looking out for one of those to collect at some point, at some event that I go to. Again, if you don't understand any of this terminology I'm using with holos and reverse holos, then please make sure to wait till the next video where all of that will be explained really in depth. Again, E-Series, incredibly popular, and often some of the hardest to actually find, especially Skyridge and Acropolis. EX Ruby and Sapphire introduced Generation 3 to the TCG, and was the first time that introduced these EX cards. It's often actually really hard to find sealed products of this era due to the dip in Pokemon popularity, resulting in less just being printed. Diamond and Pearl introduced Generation 4 to the TCG with these incredible level cards as well. Platinum was again another incredible era, which also coincided with the resurgence of Pokemon popularity. Heart Gold, Soul Silver followed, with the most notable feature being these legend cards, which came in 2 halves which you had to piece together to make one big card. Call of Legends was a one-off set, but it was a big hitter. Then Black and White introduced Generation 5 and has many features actually still used today, such as the first time we see full art cards and A-spec cards, which were reintroduced during the Scarlet and Violet era. Now, from here onwards, we're technically going into the modern era of Pokemon cards, but we're still literally in 2014, so that was a decade ago, so it's still relatively old, but it's not classified as vintage Pokemon. X and Y introduced us to Generation 6 in the TCG, which included Mega Evolutions and some super iconic sets, such as X and Y Celebrations, which was released in 2016 as a 20th year anniversary, and X and Y Evolutions, which is basically a huge reprint of the original base set from 1999. Sun and Moon introduced Generation 7, which had GX cards instead of EX cards, Rainbow Rare cards, and full art gold cards. Again, like I said earlier, please do not worry about all this terminology because I will go into that in so much depth in the next video. So just hold on and just enjoy the funny words for now, if that's what you want to take away from this. Sun and Moon Tag Team is definitely everyone's favourite set from this era, as it introduced cards with 2 Pokemon together as a team, as the name might suggest, which are still hugely popular to this day. Sun and Moon Hidden Fates was the first time they created a shiny set as well, which again still continues on today. Sword and Shield introduced us to Generation 8, where GX cards were replaced with V, VMAX, V Union and V-Star cards. Sword and Shield also introduced alternate arts and gallery cards, which were huge as a huge deal to the Pokemon card collecting hobby, whatever you want to call it. Then we get back to Scarlet and Violet, introducing us to Generation 9. Now in packs we have guaranteed holos in every pack, we have new Terra cards, the return of EX cards, and an entirely new rarity system, which again I will be explaining in the next episode. Illustration rares replace the gallery cards, and special illustration rares replace the alternate arts. That was a lot to deal with, probably. For me as well, let's be honest, but there is more. Well, not really. I'm just going to quickly go through this little section. But of course, what I was talking about there was only the English sets, which started coming out in 1999. Japanese cards, however, began in 1996. And they do, of course, both follow the generations being 1 through 9, but they don't always follow the same sets within each generation. Japanese sets often also release a lot more frequently than they do in English sets, so especially in more modern times, they often combine 2 Japanese sets to make one big English set. They sometimes also have very slight differences between the actual cards, sometimes it's just being the holo effect on them, but again, I'll get into that more on the next video as that goes under the more card type topic. Whether you collect English or Japanese is completely up to personal choice if you're mainly going for a fun hobby, but if you're going for the more profit side of things, then English single cards are normally worth a bit more, but again, it's completely up to personal choice. Sometimes, like me, I get both, I get a bit of both. I'm not really just restricted to just collecting one or the other, where most people aren't either. And there you go, that is part 1 to my complete beginner's guide on Pokemon card collecting. As I said at the start of the video, my idea here is to give you a holistic understanding of the entire hobby, rather than just telling you what to do, what the rarest card is, and like a set way of doing things. I want to give you a whole understanding so that you can make your own journey on your creating path, and it will just make it so much more fun for you, because then you can decide what you want to do with your journey. And obviously it involves money as well, so if you want to be able to be more knowledgeable in all of it, then you can put your money in better places as well. But I'll talk about costs and everything like that in a separate video as well. Now, as I've said many times, this is going to be a little series of videos, so if you have any other topics that you would like me to cover, then please let me know down below in the comments so I can make an additional episode of that particular topic if there's enough to cover it. If not, then I'll just reply to you in the comments and hopefully give you a more direct answer if it's not big enough to make a whole video on. Now, being honest, this took quite a lot of time to piece together and write up and search and Google and everything, so please make sure to leave a like, subscribe and share around to anyone you think this might be useful for, especially for all the upcoming videos as well. So make sure to stay tuned for all the upcoming episodes, being part 2 on card rarities and card types. But for now, thank you so much for watching and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!